Well, our water garden is really looking pretty good this year, especially considering the fact that we've been fighting a few problems actually for 2 years. And this time of year, one thing that most of us face with water gardens across the state is evaporation. Obviously, with the high temperatures and wind blowing, the water evaporates, and that means the pond level drops. And you can see that ours has actually dropped probably 6 inches just over the past couple of days. So we're putting the water hose in and we're adding a little bit of water to it. And as long as you add chlorinated water a little bit at a time, you'll be okay. But if it should turn out that you have to add, say, 50% water, something like that, then you need to squirt in the stuff to get rid of the chlorine so you don't harm your fish again. But another thing that we face from time to time is algae problems. And you'll notice that in the garden here, we see a little bit of algae starting to blossom up on us again, so to speak, or start to grow. And remember that early in the spring, you're going to see what is called an algae bloom anyway, where the water temperature starts to warm up. It starts to grow a little bit of algae on the side of the pond, and that's okay. That actually helps increase the longevity of the liner, believe it or not, because it keeps the sun off of it. The stuff that I'm concerned about is this right here in my hand called filamentous algae. And that stuff is real stringy, and it just grows like crazy. It can grow in deeper parts of the pond. It can grow off the rocks from the water garden. It really can be quite a problem. And when that starts to take over, then you've got to do some investigating to determine what's causing the problem. Now, to be quite honest, most people introduce that into their garden by bringing in containers of plants or other floating foliage type plants, because you'll have it in a situation where you purchase it or you get it from a neighbor. They've got the problem. It just takes a little bit to be on the container on the foliage, and once you introduce it to your pond, off it goes. So quarantine is very important on introducing anything into your water garden. Have a container where you can submerge it in water, repot it if you need to get that stuff cleaned up, and then you can treat it in that quarantined area and never have to really worry about harming your fish. But a lot of times it's too late and we have to deal with the problem. So you need to look back and think about your garden. Is the balance okay as far as a water garden? Remember, we encourage you to have 60 to 70% of the surface area covered with some type of floating plant. And that could be the water lilies that are actually containerized that are floating on the foliage, or any of the hyacinths. There's just all kinds of foliage. And that helps shade the pond a little bit during the hot summer, because algae actually grows better if it has more sunlight. So if you can shade it, that will help cut down some of the problems. Also, look at your fish population. Hopefully you'd gotten recommendations early on to know how many to put into the water garden. Well, you know, they will have babies, and it's very evident with ours. We have probably 15, 20 new babies this year, and they're all pretty well surviving, which is a good thing. But if you get too many fish, the fish feces will actually cause a nutrient problem again, and the algae will thrive on that and take off. So you've got to have a balance with the fish as well. So let me remind you quickly some recommendations as far as some types of figures on how many fish you should have. Now, there's all kinds of ranges. One formula says 1 to 6 inches of fish per 5 square feet of surface area. Another one says 8 to 12 inches per 16.5 square feet. Well, what we say is just really 1 to 2 inches of fish per square foot. And we've measured ours. We have about 134 square feet. Based on those formulas, we would have anywhere from 96 to 161 inches of fish. Well, we have probably 5 or 6 mature fish, goldfish, the comet type, that are probably 5 inches long, excluding the tail. So we have around 25, 30 inches of fish. So we have plenty of room in our pond for more fish, so we're okay with the babies. But a lot of times people get them overpopulated and run into the problem. So again, pay attention to the overall balance. That's why it's important to have these containerized plants along the edge of the bog part of your garden too, because the roots in those containers will actually help filter out some of the nutrients again and feed on that and help again, create an ecosystem to balance everything out. Now, what do you do if you get in a really severe problem, the balance is out of order, algae is taking over? Well, there's a couple of things. Last year, we tried to use the blue dye that you purchase at a garden center with water garden supplies. It's labeled for the water garden. You just squirt it in, use the directions, and it shades the pond. It turns it blue, obviously, and eventually it turns back to normal color, but that helps shade it and kill out some of it too, but we still couldn't get it under control. So this year, Alan Jobs got with one of our water quality specialists, and he suggested that we go ahead and use the copper products, and this is a last resort. Copper will actually eat away and kill the algae, and as it does that though, as it decomposes, it uses oxygen to kill it. So if you treat it during the hot part of the summer now, I can almost guarantee you're going to kill your fish. It's something you should do earlier in the summer when it's a little bit cooler, or in the fall. Now again is not a good time to do it. That's why they suggest, even when farmers use these products, to only treat half the pond at a time so you don't kill the fish from depletion of oxygen. Well, based on the recommendations, we use 1 tablespoon for this entire water garden, and you can see that it's a type of crystal, and you don't want to just throw those out in there. You want to mix up that 1 tablespoon in some warm water, let it dissolve, and then treat it. And on the farm ponds, they actually sprayed on the surface to kill the algae. What Alan did with ours to get it mixed in was he actually pulled up the filters here, poured it in the filters, and let it circulate through the pond. So there are some last result type things for you, but really the best way is to just get the garden, the balance in order, and make sure you quarantine your plants before you ever put them in, and repot things, and just keep an eye on it, because when we treated this garden, the water level was not up high enough on some of the containers, and you can see the algae still growing inside the container where the copper sulfate didn't wash into the pot. So a lot of it is just common sense, and again, if you need some information, there's plenty of it at the garden centers now, lots of sources with these materials, or don't forget your county extension office.